So Nickel Boys is a historical drama that takes place in the 1960s and revolves around the Nickel Academy Reform School for boys who have been arrested. And I think what I love so much about how this is set up is that it never feels like it's just seen from one perspective. And I think as the film goes along, I think it starts surprising you with how much bigger it becomes as the story keeps going along. So the film revolves around Elwood, who's played by Ethan Heresy. And Elwood is a young man who has just kind of like struggled in the 60s to kind of like grow up and define himself. But it feels like, he might be bound for bigger things. And it feels like, he has a chance to go to a really good school. But all it takes is one wrong car ride with someone to help him get into town. And the cops take him in and they ship him off to reform school. Now, the interesting thing about the way the film is shot, from director Ramel Ross, try not to tongue twist that there. So Ramel Ross directs this entirely from the POV of Elwood. We are constantly seeing everything through the eyes of Elwood here, from like his arrest to him being shipped off to reform school, and just watching as he sits in the car and watches as the white kids who are arrested are being ushered off to this part of the reform school, while he goes into the area where all the black students have been sequestered. Now, what's fascinating about the way that we focus on Elwood is that we do get to endure a lot of the simpler and quieter moments, as well as those moments of just feeling despair about the fact that he might never get out of here. We also get to connect with another character called Turner, who's played by Brandon Wilson. And here's where the film actually literally shifts. The perspective shifts now to Turner, and we see Turner's point of view from having been in Nickel Academy for a while, and has tried to get used to it and tries to, basically show Elwood the ropes and let him know that, there are chances where, you're not going to be locked into, learning stuff all day or working the fields. You can actually do a little bit more on this job by working for people and running errands. But, there's not much more to it than that. You're going to have to get used to it here. And the POV doesn't just turn it over to Turner as though Elwood's story is going to be over at that point. It keeps shifting back and forth. It's like we're either getting Elwood's POV or Turner's POV. So we're constantly locked in with them so that, we can feel that level of claustrophobia and despair for being trapped in this situation where it feels like, there is no future for these two kids. And then, just when you think that's going to be the perspective, is just focusing on, these two kids in reform school, the film actually takes a non-linear time jump to when Elwood was much older, and he's played by Taveed Diggs. And here is where the film actually takes a third-person perspective. We see older Elwood's perspective from literally from the back of his head. So we're just following him around. It feels like we're right behind him, like we're just right on his shoulder, and watching as he tries to endure everything that happened after he got out of Nickel Academy, which doesn't get revealed until the end of the film. But we do see the aftermath of what happens with that as Elwood struggles to, dig up more information on the academy, and how there were black people buried there. There were unmarked graves, digging up all the torment that happened there, and then just dealing it with other people. Because at one point, one of my favorite scenes in the film is when the adult Elwood is just sitting in a bar, and in comes, a fellow inmate that he knew from Nickel Academy. And he's clearly hasn't fully recovered. Like, the trauma is still lingering with him. And it's just one of those moments where Elwood finds it, struggling to get through this conversation without, drudging up the past, because he spent his entire time just digging through this material and just, tries to resonate with and attempts to resonate with someone who has experienced the same troubles that he's faced there as well. And then as if that weren't enough, because then we actually we jump back and forth between like the younger Elwood's like POV at Nickel Academy to older Elwood outside of Nickel Academy. But then we're also treated to like montages of the evidence that is unearthed about the Academy, home video of Elwood and how he's gotten used to himself after that time. And this might be like a tipping point for some people, but there are also moments where the camera will just pan up to the stars and just start contemplating life in general, and, you know, showing you like glimpses of the earth and kind of like showing you how much bigger life is just beyond the small world of Nickel Academy. Now, the film, there isn't, in case you're wondering, there is not a real Nickel Academy. There is, however, a real school called the Dozer School for Boys, and it's based. It was mostly based on on a book by Colson Whitehead, so there is real world relation here. But I think through this fictionalized story of showing like this racist version, you know, like not even just like the racism within 1960s Florida, and digging up all of the hurt of the past, and just this longing to escape and this desperation of feeling like you're always trapped, where just like the perspective alone is fascinating for this film, and how it forces you to look at all the angles here of Elwood's life, from just like from a younger first-person perspective to an older third-person perspective to just an all-encompassing, analyzing everything about Elwood's life and life in general, that I think paints this very complete picture about how volatile we are with our lives, and how, and how like daunting it can become at times, because the juxtaposition of just going from the POV of just Elwood and Turner just hanging out and reading and chatting with one another, to just getting these beautiful glimpses of like of constellations, and looking down on the earth and thinking about everything that we've done with our lives and everything that has been built within humanity. And I know this seems very, like I might be making this seem very grandiose, as though it's kind of like Tree of Life, and I don't really feel that it's on like the same levels as like a Terrence Malick film, because it never feels like it's jumping around trying to find something to say. It's very clearly trying to tell the story of Elwood and Turner and how they finally decided to escape from Nickel Academy. That's very much like the more grounded story. But then I think for considering the aftermath and how it affects these characters into adulthood, and like contemplating everything about life in general, I think makes this film so fascinating. And I felt like I hate to go back to Terrence Malick, but did it give me that feeling from Tree of Life, where it has like this existential level of just considering everything and letting it wash over you. That's especially true with like the scenes where we get to see just like a smattering of the evidence that Elwood has unearthed, of just like, like here's newspaper clippings, here's a photograph, here's like something, here's evidence of stuff we dug up from the ground, here's recorded footage of Elwood from the early 2000s, here's all these elements of past lives and current lives that have shaped everything about Elwood that has come afterwards. And I think it might be a little bit frustrating, I think, for some people that it's non-linear, but I think having the film divvied up that way does make you consider so much more than just whether or not Elwood and Turner are going to get out of this situation. And not just like lingering on like the racism of Florida that led them to this predicament. It is lingered on, and there is a despair and a lingering notion of just, feeling that there's nothing you can do within such an unjust system. And I think that is best portrayed through Elwood's grandmother, played by Angeline Ellis Taylor. And Hattie basically tries to fight for Elwood. It tries to find the legal way to help him get out of Nickel Academy, and can't do it. Every time she attempts it, she's swindled. Like she can't convince the judge, she can't convince a lawyer. Lawyers will run off with her money. Just everything she does doesn't work. And I think I think it's interesting to see like how she struggles to maintain that hope, because like before Elwood is shipped off, there's a very sweet moment where Elwood is hanging around Hattie, and they have a good connection that we see throughout the film. But there's one very telling moment where Hattie's just sitting at the dining room table, and she's decorating a cake. And just like the way that Elwood takes this fascination with like her face, and the way that she's decorating this cake, and the way that she just kind of like scrapes off the frosting as she's talking about how hard life can be, and how difficult it is, and just acknowledging it but still trying to find a way to keep moving forward, I think is just such a beautiful, very bittersweet moment in the film, which I think just becomes just because I don't quite want to say like it's like the central theme of the film, because there's much grander themes going on here, but it is one of the more deeply personal moments that that I think speaks to how just to how rough life can be. So just fantastic performances here, like from Ethan Harris and of course, like Taveed Diggs is usually pretty damn good, but also Brandon Wilson as Turner. Just fantastic performances from these young actors. They really embody this sort of like longing for more and a desire to learn, but also just recognizing the despair of their current situations. And just, I love the way that Ross directs this film. He has this perfect, Ramel has like this perfect vision for trying to make the audience care about this beyond just like what we might expect from this type of story. Like, because if I were to just tell you that Nickel Boys was just about Elwood and Turner, these two boys who are at reform school and try to escape, that would be too simplistic. That would just, it might be an okay drama that might convince some people, but it would seem very, very simple. And it's so much more than that. Everything from the way that it progresses through time, like we see the adult Elwood at various times in his life, which I think perfectly reflects how it perfectly pairs up with like the greater shots of like space and the history that he unearths. I think it's just everything about the way that it's set up. It makes you think not just about the racism that went on with the 1960s, not just about the inhumanity of reform school, not even just about like, the racial and the political movements that followed and the aftermath and the trauma, but just everything. It makes you think about these people as more than just being like a statistic, or like, or victims to be placed in a headline, or someone who's just researching the past. Like, there's so much more to people than that. And I think that Ramo Ross's film perfectly communicates this in a very beautiful and mesmerizing way that I could not stop thinking about. Nickel Boys has so much more to say than what it might imply from the promotion and the trailers here. So the film definitely had an effect on me, and I can't recommend it enough.